Coming up on One Detroit.
I always have issues with Flint because it was a terrible thing to have happen.
Looking back on Governor Rick Snyder's 8 years in office and the impact on Michigan. We'll also look ahead to 2019 and the stories to watch for. Plus a closer look at food insecurity and Forgotten Harvest's work to meet the need.
Our parents made it every year.
And it's a New Year's celebration you may not have experienced before. Join me, Stephen Henderson and Nolan Finley downtown. One Detroit is coming up.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
I have a question. Who wants to go first? To win? Who wants to grow our business? Who wants to make more money? Who wants more job opportunities? If you want Michigan to compete and become a top 10 state, raise your hand. Together, we've turned Michigan around and started moving forward. Now help us build a stronger Michigan than ever. Raise your hand at strongermichigan.com.
Support also provided by the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, Detroit Journalism Engagement Fund, and the Bill and Shirley Fox Fund for Leadership and Public Affairs Programming at Detroit Public TV.
Hi, I'm Christy McDonald, and welcome to One Detroit. We're in the holiday mood at Campus Martius with the tree and the skating and the shops and all the fun here downtown. We have a big show coming up for you. Coming up on One Detroit, we're going to take you inside the Detroit News editorial board's meeting with Nolan Finley as they question Governor Rick Snyder on his last days in office, lame duck, things left undone, and the future of Flint. Then I'll catch up with Nolan and Stephen Henderson at Beacon Park. We'll talk Snyder's legacy and the big stories to watch for in 2019. Also coming up, the mission of Forgotten Harvest and overcoming food insecurity. And experience a Japanese New Year's celebration, the story behind Mochisuki. That's all coming up on One Detroit. But we are starting off with Governor Rick Snyder's last interview with the Detroit News editorial board. He talked a lot about his legacy, and he also talked about what's happening in the lame duck session of the legislature.
Have you seen anything yet that you won't sign? Is there still horse trading going on?
Well, I know you never like my answers to these kind of questions, but let me be consistent after 8 years. It's always fair to ask, but as a practical matter, other than initiatives we start, I don't comment on things until they get to my desk. And what I would say is I'm going to look at from what I believe is the best public policy answer for the state of Michigan, just like I have for 8 years.
Do you worry they're overreaching with some of these bills, the bills to strip power from the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, the gutting of the two ballot proposals? Have you been working with them at all on those to sort of pull them back in?
Largely, they've set their own course on this.
So are there items that on your list, on your to-do list, that you think just aren't going to get done, you're going to have to set aside?
Well, again, if I look back on things that I wish we could have done more on, the one that stands out probably most prominently would be no fault.
No fault insurance reform, okay.
That needs to happen. And I tell people I view it more as not as much a partisan question as a special interest question. Special interests have been effective in essentially leveraging partisanship and other things to confuse the issue enough to prevent some major reforms. But those reforms need to happen.
What else didn't you get done that you wish you had?
Well, that would be the biggest one, Nolan. Again, if you go through the list, I can give you the list at some point. I mean, we had a list of the hundreds.
You have it in your pocket.
I do. This is the 2017. We're working on the 2018 version, and part of the comment I gave people, it's a good thing there are term limits. I'm not tall enough to hold the list up anymore.
We got a stool. Education. You satisfied with what you were able to do for schools and education performance? We are still, as a state, not much better performing than when you come in.
No, again, that would be an illustration of still working on A to F. I think we could use a better accountability system. Okay. I think there's still improvements within the educational system that need to take place. I'm proud of some of the things we've done, and it's interesting. We've done so many things, and it's been enough years. People have forgotten some of the great things that have really taken place. What we did in early childhood. I mean, we led the nation. We invested $130 million over 2 years. So literally, we put tens of thousands of kids the opportunity to have preschool that didn't before. That's really cool. And then at the other end of the spectrum, what we've done with apprenticeships, the Marshall Plan is huge. These are all good things. What I would say is, what we didn't is get enough through the entire K-12 kind of system of just getting better performance.
So take a look at these 8 years, where the state was when you came in, where it is when you're leaving, and assess your own performance over those 8 years.
Well, my own performance, I've never viewed that as relevant. I mean, as a practical mayor. And I said that. If you go back to...
Well, are you satisfied?
I'm asked to be measured on two things as governor. Did I do what I said I was going to do? And secondly, did I build a long-term foundation for success that had nothing to do with me? And I'm satisfied that we built a strong foundation. If you looked at it, we had among the highest unemployment in the nation. We're at 3.9%. We had lost more jobs than anybody. We've created over 560,000 private sector jobs. Look at Detroit. Detroit was the most troubled urban area in our country for how many years? Now it's viewed as one of the most exciting places in our country, and young people want to come from around the world to live and work in this city, and it's climbing fast. We've got 600,000 people plus that have health care today. We've improved their lives.
How closely are you working with your successor?
Closely. And they've been very good discussions. I've met with her every week. I've got meetings scheduled next week with her. Our teams are meeting at all different levels. We've been working on this for a year, regardless of who won. But I would say in the context of now that the election's over, I would have to give her positive credit for doing a good job of reaching out and having good dialogue.
When you look at your governorship, I mean, it was rolling along very nicely until you hit Flint.
Yeah.
Personally, have you made peace with Flint?
Well, I always have issues with Flint because it was a terrible thing to have happen. And again, some of the people involved, we had failures at all levels of government, but some of the people involved, particularly in the so-called experts in water, made some bad calls in my view, and they work for me. So I did what I thought you should always do, is take responsibility for that. And so that's something that I won't forget. But we've tried to turn that to a learning experience. If you look at what we're doing with PFAS, we're the nation's leader in taking on an emerging environmental issue that involves water, largely.
A good piece of what you'll be remembered for is your involvement in Detroit. You put the city into emergency manager and then into bankruptcy. Were you certain that was going to work?
No, you couldn't be certain. And actually, most people thought I was crazy, but it worked. People rallied. I mean, to have legislators from the UP to the Lake Michigan shoreline being excited about supporting the grand bargain. And the great part is they've seen the benefit now.
So look who I found, Nolan Finley and Stephen Henderson here at Beacon Park, and we're in the holiday spirit here as well. We even have the carols going on in the background. And we could grow poinsettias, I think, in this.
I got a Christmas joke.
All kinds of stuff in
You have
there.
a Christmas joke.
I got a good Christmas joke.
Is it clean?
Yes, of course.
All right, go ahead. I will indulge you, I guess.
Okay, so an alphabet has 26 letters, right?
Right.
What letter is, okay, I could never do that.
This is the worst of people who can't tell the joke.
Santa's alphabet's only got 25 letters. Which letter is missing?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Noel.
No L. That's good night, folks. No one will be here all week. Tip your wait staff. All right. Well, it's a great way to get into the holiday show and coming out of the interview that you guys did at the Detroit News editorial board with Governor Snyder. And I think we've been hearing a lot about what his legacy will be, but I think everyone's still watching what's happening in Lansing in one of the most active lame duck sessions that we've had in a long time.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think anyone who's there has ever seen anything quite like this, and both in terms of volume and extreme nature of the bills that are being proposed. I mean, this idea that you lose an election in the executive branches and use the legislative branch to pare back the powers of that executive branch before they take office is, I mean, it's completely unprecedented. No one's ever heard of that before, and it speaks to kind of a desperate crybaby kind of dynamic that this whole lame duck session really has been spoiled by.
Desperate crybaby dynamic, would you agree with that?
Well, I think there's definitely some overreach there. Some things I think they had to do, they could not let those ballot initiatives go in as was. They were ruinous for the state's business climate. The governor asked for some changes, got a little compromise out of the legislature. He had to do that. In terms of the powers of the Attorney General and Secretary of State, I'm not sure he's going to sign them. That's what I'll be
I hope
looking
he does.
for.
Yeah, I think.
Well, first of all, he didn't get the things he wanted out of the legislature.
Right.
He wanted that tipping fee for the garbage dumping
Yes.
and the water rate increase
Yes.
to fix the infrastructure, and they just blew him off. I don't know why he would sign it.
Well, the other thing I think that will offend his sensibilities is that this is changing the rules, right? I think he's been very deferential to the legislature and has said it's a body elected to make laws, and I'm not really going to stand in the way, even when I disagree with what they're doing. I'm not going to stand in the way of them doing their jobs. Here, though, they're going far outside of their own jobs and redefining jobs in the executive branch. And I think that, depending on what his lawyers say about how fidelitous that is even to the Constitution, I think he may say this goes beyond what the legislative prerogative should be.
Let me ask you this, Nolan. How did you find him in this last interview? And I bring that up because of of how he reacted when you asked him about Flint. You could see in terms of his face and his demeanor change
That
a little
question
bit.
always stops him. I think overall, though, he was the same governor. You know, he came in, he's talking about these last few weeks as if they were the last few years, and he still had time. I think he's still, going after it. I don't sense that he's burnt out or at all. I remember John Engler in the last period of his third term, and there was a good deal of, disconnect there and a good deal of burnout. Snyder's not burned out at all. Flint, as you heard him and watched him, still pains him, and he doesn't quite know how yet, I think, to reconcile that with his overall governorship.
So when people look back, and we look back at Snyder's tenure, how would they describe it?
Well, I mean, I've said this before. I think that you can sum up almost the entire thing in this sort of tale of two cities narrative, right? You look at the tremendous amount of capital he put on the line to help Detroit out of one of the worst economic problems in American history. The things that were done to set the city back on a road towards some sort of stability and positivity. But then you look at Flint on the other hand. I mean, just the ruinous nature of the decision making, the lack of decision making, the lack of accountability for decision making, and the harm, the real harm that was done to people who live in that city. There is no way to define Rick Snyder without that alongside these other things. And that doesn't mean that he didn't also do other things that were good for the state. But the thing that stands out in most people's minds, and will especially nationally, are Detroit and Flint.
Nolan.
I think he leaves Michigan a better place than he found it, much better place than he found it. You think about where we were in 2010, it was hopeless here. So I think overall he leaves a lot better Michigan than when he came into the office. And I would argue that even Flint, long run, will be better off. Infrastructure replaced, investment in the business community. Snyder did a lot of things he haven't been talked about much, to regenerate interest in a business community. You look at what's happening in downtown Flint. That's all helped by the state and its commitment to make up for the water crisis.
Well, that stuff was going on before the water crisis,
Not
and it was an awful lot of it. I remember taking a tour with Dan Kildee of Flint in 2008, 2009, when he was the treasurer of that county, and he was talking about all of the things that were online to happen to move that city forward economically. Most of those things we're seeing come to reality now, but they've been in the works for 10 years. Rick Snyder can't really claim a lot of credit for that. He jumped in and helped. He helped.
He started a major initiative,
right, but he wouldn't have done it if not for the water crisis.
Interest from business and
Yeah,
investors.
but he wouldn't have done that if not for the water crisis.
Well, let's
Still, Flint's going to be better off long term.
It's like saying, I cut your arm off, but I got you a new pair of pants.
Flint was not didn't go into emergency manager because it was a well-run healthy city.
No.
City. That wasn't a power play.
It's
That
a
city
city
was a
that
mess.
is struggled with population loss and lack of
And
national
mismanagement.
and state support
extreme
alongside
mismanagement.
And it will indeed need
corruption.
help for the next 10 to 20 years to come. As we only have a minute or so left, guys, predictions for 2019, pull out the magic 8 ball. What are the things that we're going to be talking about here in Michigan in the next year?
I think roads. I think roads are going to get a major deal
Major
applied
push
to them. I
in
think
January,
Gretchen
February,
Whitmer
March.
gets that done. I think she comes out of the
No?
gate convincing Republican legislators to come along with her. She'll give up some things. They'll give up some things. But I think we will get a bill that actually starts to repair what got broken there.
What do you think? What in
I think that's
2019?
gonna
If
be
you don't
tough.
think it's
You don't think that
it's
happens?
roads,
Well, it's going to take money, and I don't know how Snyder couldn't get a $5 fee increase out of this
I agree.
legislature. I hope it's Rose, and I hope Steve's right. I think we're going to be talking about this trade war going into 2019 as its impact starts to come to full fruition. Nothing could slow this economy more than this continued trade war and these tariffs, particularly if they extend much further into the auto industry.
I think a lot of look at leadership in Washington and where things have changed after the midterm elections. That's what I'm going to be watching for, I think, as well. All right, guys, that is going to do it. That's going to do it for us. You guys have a Merry Christmas.
You too.
And a Happy New Year, and we'll see you back here in 2019. Yep. You know, and we tend to think a lot about people in need during the holidays, but Forgotten Harvest has been working to fight food insecurity every day in Southeast Michigan for 28 years. One Detroit's Will Glover met up with CEO Kirk Mays to talk about how their mission has grown.
In our neighborhoods, not just in our struggling neighborhoods, but even in some of our middle class and affluent neighborhoods where people actually do have to figure out, especially during transition times in their lives, how to put the next meal on the table.
Forgotten Harvest CEO Kirk Mays is no stranger to finding help for people who need it most. He served as Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan's Deputy Group Executive of Jobs and the Economy. He then connected with neighborhoods as the Executive Director of the Brightmoor Alliance. Now Kirk is guiding one of Michigan's top 10 nonprofits to help fight food insecurity in Southeast Michigan.
Forgotten Harvest is Metro Detroit's food rescue organization. We're dedicated to relieving hunger in Metro Detroit and preventing nutritious food waste. We have drivers that leave our facility every day and they go on a route to visit local grocery stores, pick up food from places that is available, and then we turn it around and then redistribute it back to our community for free.
The need for Forgotten Harvest continues to grow. Michigan's poverty rate is 15%. That's 3 points higher than the national average. In Wayne County, that number jumps to 22.9%. And in Detroit, almost 35% of the population lives in poverty. Identifying those who need help isn't as easy as people may think.
It's hard to identify a face for hunger or food insecurity in our community. For us, it means when somebody is worried about or doesn't know where their next meal or a future meal is coming from, especially during transition times in their lives, how to put the next meal on the table.
You say transition time, what is that?
A dad who loses a job, or a mom, a health crisis. There could be any number of things that set a typical family off course. We're talking about persistent hunger that causes food insecurity, the type of hunger that even when you're eating, that hunger has made such a mark on you that with a meal in front of you, you're still worried about where the next one's coming from because you don't want to go through the pain and the vulnerability that came from not knowing how to address this problem. So when you think about how food insecurity, how it affects people, adults throughout our society, for those who have had to deal with it on a regular basis, it creates now this extra layer of worry in every place that they go, even when it seems like they have what they need.
It sounds like it has obviously a physical effect because you're physically hungry, but a huge psychological impact.
Absolutely. And then as a child is still developing. Right. They need those nutrients. They need that nourishment in order for them to go out and tackle this world and be strong. If a child is going through all of these dynamics that come with development and growth and learning and social interactions, and they have to do that while they're hungry, and they don't even control that whole situation, I mean, we're setting them up for an unfair hill to climb.
Forgotten Harvest has rescued and redistributed 45 million pounds of food, with 35 refrigerated trucks and 16,000 volunteers. Kirk says he's always working to expand their network of partners to make sure they reach as many people in need as they can.
Addressing hunger is not a food issue. It's a logistics challenge. The food is already there. We just need a coordinated method throughout our country to make it happen. And we have a great example here in Southeast Michigan with Forgotten Harvest. We can show you a way to get lion's shares of food to address this hole in our society, and we can get rid of food insecurity. I do believe that.
One of the things I really love about the holidays is tradition and ritual. You're with the same people, you're eating some of the same foods. Well, we want to show you a Japanese New Year tradition and the art of pounding rice.
And then we'll be making another round of mochi, so just pace yourself, okay?
A community center in Madison Heights. This is a Japanese mochisuki New Year's celebration, Detroit style.
Put on some gloves and roll.
Members of the Japanese American Citizens League are making and eating mochi made from a gooey rice paste.
We created a lot of different ways to have it. We have it, the way I grew up eating it was with shoyu and sugar.
Shoyu, that's soy sauce.
Fried, and I have a frying pan actually, so if you want to fry some. We have hinako, the soybean flour with sugar and a little salt, and you roll it in there.
One thing I remember is because it stretches if you pull it, and I think it has something to do with longevity of your life. But my memory is kind of fuzzy, so.
Mochisuki goes back 1,000 years. In Japan, the celebration can go all day. The rice cakes take center stage to music and activities for the kids.
The rice harvest is in the fall, right? And then the celebration of New Year's is a big deal, so I think that's kind of related to it too. Is it good?
Very good. I'm very fond of mochi.
Like lutefisk in Sweden or the fruitcakes of the Western world, mochi returns every holiday season. Some love it, some don't.
Can you make this size of mochi? Oh yeah, okay. Here, grab that.
But with mochi, it's not just the texture, but the danger. A choking hazard if you're not careful.
Eat it, chew it good. Big pipe, chew it good.
Oh, chew it good. Wow. I've never had it like this before.
Oh, why don't you have it in the soup?
Well, this is ozoni. This is the New Year's soup. And it has it has carrots and tofu and fish cake and lotus root.
The mochi sits in the bowl like a matzo ball. This is just the second year the Citizens League has held Mochisuki in Detroit, even though the group has been here more than 70 years.
And it started out as a support group of obviously Japanese Americans, and it turned into more of a civil rights focused organization, and we have chapters everywhere, including obviously here in Detroit. The Detroit chapter started when a lot of people who came out of camp relocated to Detroit, and at its peak, I understand there were about 400 members.
Mary Kamidoy was born in California, held in an internment camp in Arkansas during World War II. She's long retired from Ford Motor Company, but remembers Mochisuki as a child.
All the time that we were making mochi, the kids just played around with it. Our parents made it every year and had friends come over. And so, and I'm one of these, I didn't eat it, I didn't like it. So I crabbed every time we were molding the thing. Ma, I don't even eat the thing. Why do I have to come home and do this? She said, Mary, just keep molding it.
Molding mochi, that's the easy part. You need people to pound the rice, swinging a big mallet over and over again.
For you to pound, that's a job. It's like my dad used to say, if you don't pound right, you will hurt your back. And then the one that had to turn it, if you don't time it right, the mallet will come down on your hand or your head.
Technology to the rescue, the mochi-making machine. Mary's brother-in-law found one in Los Angeles.
He brought it home, and my sister said, come on over, you got to see this machine, Mary. It's really funny.
This one just works automatically. It steams, and when it's ready, the pounding starts. The other two, you have to push the button.
I've always been saying, I would say it to my mom, why is it Japan hasn't made a machine so that the mochi comes out in like this, out of it, and it cuts off at a certain, Mary, then there'd be no fun to this. Because see, these machines, the way they're cutting it, it's a mess.
You like to eat it now, though, huh?
Not really. I will eat one or two, but that's it. Not because I like it so well. I just eat it because it's just custom.
What are you going to do with that, buddy?
You know, after a while, when you don't have it, you sort of miss it.
What a great celebration. No matter how you celebrate, I hope you have a wonderful holiday with family and friends. And that's going to do it for One Detroit. Thanks so much for joining us and for supporting all of Detroit Public Television's programs. Make sure you find us online. Tell us what you'd like to see in 2019. I'm Christy McDonald. We'll see you back here next Thursday. Take care.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
I have a question. Who wants to go first? To win? Who wants to grow our business? Who wants to make more money? Who wants more job opportunities? If you want Michigan to compete and become a top 10 state, raise your hand. Together, we've turned Michigan around and started moving forward. Now help us build a stronger Michigan than ever. Raise your hand at strongermichigan.com.
Support also provided by the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, Detroit Journalism Engagement Fund, and the Bill and Shirley Fox Fund for Leadership and Public Affairs Programming at Detroit Public TV.